Futurama is a show that grounds itself in the absurd, and the inhabitants of the year 3000 tend to play by different rules to the rest of us. Still, there have been a few occasions on which the cast of Futurama have crossed the line, even by their standards. Lying in order to avoid punishment is an ill-advised but understandable indiscretion, and it's certainly something of an overreach when Planet Express's robotic ne'er-do-well Bender tells authorities on Chapek 9 that he personally slaughtered 1 billion humans to avoid their wrath. In Season 1's Fear of a Bot Planet, a delivery to the zealously anti-human Chapek 9 goes south when Bender is arrested for his association with Earthlings. Diabolical monster that he is, Bender exaggerates his history of mass murder in order to exploit the population's bigotry and propel himself to celebrity status. Of course, Bender is a liar who hasn't killed 1 billion humans. In fact, most of the stories about humankind that he tells the gullible mechanical citizens of Chapek 9 are lifted from vampire and werewolf legends.
Is it true they bite your neck and suck your transmission fluid and then you become a human?
Sure, why not?
Ultimately, Bender drops the act to rescue his co-worker pals Fry and Leela from execution at the hands of the Council of Robot Elders. Once the Chapek 9 robots realize that the human Fry and the human-ish Leela have brought a large box of precious lug nuts, they abandon their anti-human bigotry. But it's fair to say that, had Bender been left to his own devices, things might have turned out more than a little badly. Lock up your pets, folks. Bender Bending Rodriguez is in town. Season 4's Jurassic Bark sits atop many lists of Futurama's best episodes, and for good reason. It's the heartwarming tale of Fry discovering the fossilized remains of his 20th century canine companion, Seymour. Ultimately, Fry decides against bringing Seymour back via cloning to join him in the 31st century. Before Fry comes to that decision, however, Bender throws the fossilized pup into a nearby lava pit in a fit of violent jealousy. And sure, Bender pulls the pooch out of danger once he realizes he's totally destroyed Fry's soul by giving in to misguided envy. But still, what kind of demented sociopath tries to off a dog with molten lava? Even when you take into account the fact that robots don't have souls, this is a pretty crummy thing to do. And it's hardly the first time Bender's eyes have turned green, too. For similar reasons, he flushes Nibbler down a toilet in Season 2's I Second That Emotion.
Aren't you upset at all? How would you feel if I flushed Fry down the toilet?
Only one way to find out.
What else can you say? The dude really hates pets. Bender's an amoral kleptomaniac on the best of days, but his friendship with Fry makes him look more like a lovable rascal. Most of the time, at least. Sometimes it simply provides Bender with a rationalization for his most overtly supervillainish machinations. At the conclusion of the 2008 special The Beast with a Billion Backs, Bender finds himself resenting Fry for spending so much time with Yivo, a space god who is also romancing every living creature in the universe at once. Outraged, Bender travels to Robot Hell to recruit an army of demon robots to rise up and conquer Earth. The robot devil says no dice on an army unless Bender trades his firstborn child, a deal that Bender really has no problem with.
Wow, that was pretty brutal even by my standards.
No backsies.
When Bender springs his unholy invasion, Fry informs him that all living creatures are moving off their planets to live on Yivo's head, which is the basis for humanity's conception of heaven. Not long after, still missing Fry, Bender leads his army of the damned to raise heaven. In the end, Bender's invasion spurs Yivo to break up with the universe, cruelly tearing every living thing away from its blissful salvation. In short, not cool, Bender. How far would you go to keep your pride? How about the pride of your entire home planet? In Season 3's Time Keeps on Slippin', the Harlem Globetrotters fly in from the Globetrotter home world to challenge Earth to a basketball game.
What happens if we lose?
Nothing! There's nothing at stake and no threat beyond the shame of defeat.
Of course, you wouldn't expect this to bother Professor Hubert J. Farnsworth. As the owner of Planet Express and the man directly responsible for the appalling and needless deaths of numerous ex-employees, he should already be completely numb to shame. Rather than allow a ragtag squad of Earthlings to graciously lose an exhibition game, Farnsworth sends Fry, Leela, and Bender to the far reaches of the galaxy to collect unstable chronoton particles. Upon their return, he exposes baby mutant supermen to the ominous materials in order to age them into an adult basketball team in an insanely brief period of time. But Farnsworth's reckless and bafflingly unnecessary behavior causes massive damage to the time-space continuum. The linear sequence of events begins flashing forward at unpredictable intervals, imperiling the very matrix of reality. Luckily, Farnsworth proves more than capable of undoing his own mistake. He and the Globetrotters join forces and eventually figure out a solution, bringing space-time back to normal. You'd hope he'd have learned his lesson after that, but come on, let's not kid ourselves. In the highly partisan era in which we live, plenty of folks will relate to Zap Brannigan's unhinged contempt for the concept of neutrality.
With enemies, you know where they stand, but with neutrals, who knows? It sickens me.
In Season 2's Brannigan Begin Again, Zap's hatred for neutrality spills over into delusional paranoia. The Democratic Order of Planets invites Zap as the guest of honor at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new dupe headquarters in the neutral zone. But when the Planet Express crew arrives to deliver the oversized novelty scissors Zap needs to perform his ribbon-cutting duties, Zap arrests them immediately on suspicion of neutrality. Because committing civil rights violations against the Planet Express crew proves time-consuming and distracting, Zap decides to save himself a few minutes by using his spaceship's laser, set to Hyperdeath mode, to cut the Dupe HQ ribbon from space. And so concludes the brief but noteworthy existence of the new Dupe headquarters.
Whoopsie daisy.
Zap's entire presence on Futurama depends on him making breathtakingly poor choices that force the folks around him to mop up his messes. But blowing up Dupe HQ for essentially no reason at all is going much too far, even with his track record of senseless mayhem. The version of Richard Nixon who appears in Futurama might not be as rotten as the actual 37th President of the United States, but his capacity for destruction is still very impressive. In Season 2's Ahead in the Polls, Richard Nixon decides to get back in the political game and run for President of Earth. Like many other celebrities and historical figures in the 31st century, Nixon's existence is limited to that of a floating head in a jar due to the decomposed condition of his old body. Much of the episode's story revolves around Nixon's technically legal use of Bender's robot body. But once Bender reclaims his torso, arms, and legs, Nixon simply acquires a much larger body equipped with devastating weapons systems.
Nixon's back!
This Gundam-esque Nixon locks down the robot vote and becomes the new president of Earth. Still bitter and crazy from his infamous near impeachment and resignation over the Watergate scandal, Nixon embarks on a rampage of death and destruction throughout the city of Washington, D.C. The nation of Earth may never fully recover. When a man lives his first 20-something years as a dangerously broke pizza delivery technician, he's bound to cut loose if his luck ever swings in the opposite direction. So it's understandable why Fry shamelessly flaunts his wealth when the interest on his 1,000-year-old bank account makes him a billionaire in Season 1's A Fishful of Dollars. Now, plenty of people will tell you that taxidermy is in pretty poor taste, and collecting skeletons really isn't much less creepy. And sure enough, when Fry pays $10,000 at an auction for the skeleton of stalwart television actor Ted Danson, you've got to admit he's kind of crossing a line. Fry's newfound ocean of cash and pre-existing 90s nostalgia coalesces into a turn of events that introduces the evil company known as MomCorp. Danson's bones are only mentioned in a one-off gag, as Fry says he needs them because he's got an idea for a sitcom. But the fact that Fry treats the remains of a once-living person like this demonstrates exactly how far down the rabbit hole he has fallen. Anyone will tell you how much it sucks to miss out on the finale of your favorite show. But when Lur, ruler of the planet Omicron Persei 8, is prevented from watching the last episode of Single Female Lawyer after a technical glitch on Earth, he overreacts just a tad. The trajectory of events depicted in Season 1's When Aliens Attack is set in motion before the opening credits. As Fry often ends up at the center of universe-altering events in Futurama, it tracks that he was the one who spilled beer on the late 90s Fox control panel, eventually cutting off the broadcast Omicronians who are watching 1,000 light-years away. To extract his revenge and enforce his will, Lur swoops down to Earth and immediately destroys the Eiffel Tower, the Great Sphinx of Giza, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and other prominent Earth landmarks. He pulls off all of that in pretty rapid succession too, though that's mostly because they've all been relocated to the same beach in New York. Independence Day, eat your heart out. Anyway, Lur gets to see his program by the episode's end, mostly thanks to a little creativity by the Planet Express crew. Talk about a temper tantrum though. Over time, societies change, and behavior considered taboo in one era might be acceptable during another. But there are some things that cross a line no matter where or when you come from. Grave robbing definitely belongs in that category, especially if that grave belongs to a family member. In Season 3's The Luck of the Fryrish, Fry is horrified to discover a 21st century man named Philip J. Fry, who looks just like him, took possession of his long-lost 7-leaf clover. Worse still, this imposter apparently became a globally famous astronaut and rock star. Fry assumes this paragon of human achievement must be his brother Yancey, who would have had access to the clover and knowledge of its near supernatural powers. While in the process of digging up what he thinks is his elder sibling's corpse, however, Fry notices the gravestone's inscription.
Here lies Philip J. Fry, named for his uncle, to carry on his spirit.
This happens just in time for Bender to break open the coffin and snag the lucky clover. It's an embarrassing mix-up to be sure, but it's also a lesson to the rest of us that grave robbing is kind of a no-no, no matter what your robotic best friend might tell you. Fry transgresses the boundaries of decency in a whole new way in Season 3's Roswell That Ends Well. In this episode, Fry accidentally sends the Planet Express ship back to the 1940s, where it crashes in Roswell, New Mexico. Plenty of hijinks ensue. Zoidberg gets vivisected, Farnsworth and Leela go shopping, and Bender becomes whatever this is. But Fry's dalliance with history is the most impressive of all. During his relatively short time in the past, Fry manages to accidentally kill his grandfather, deliberately sleep with his grandmother, and accidentally impregnate her with the fetus that eventually becomes Fry's father, Yancey Fry Sr. The events of this episode reverberate throughout the mythology of Futurama. In fact, Fry's status as his own grandfather is, unbeknownst to everybody but Nibbler, the real reason why he's in the future in the first place. The alterations made to Fry's brain by doing the nasty and the pasty later makes him the ideal candidate to defeat the evil species known as Brainspawn and save the entire universe. It also makes him a total doofus, but hey, you win some, you lose some. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite shows are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.